Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but first, let's hear from our podcast sponsors. We want to thank Final Forms for their support of the podcast. Final Forms is the industry leader in registration, but you have to know this. Final Forms is more than just forms. Final Forms is a team, it's technology, and it's a service that serves schools with things like compliance, communication, and risk management solutions. Final Forms can help your stakeholders with things like mobile accessibility. It has reminders for parents about policies, about physicals, and all the forms that go with athletics. Final Forms can help with team communication, attendance, and even certification management for coaches. And for ADs, Final Forms can help with eligibility, with rosters, all the reports that come across your desk. And it does this using secure language translation and ADA compliance. You know, it's time for you to talk to a team that's walked in your shoes. To take the next steps and find out what Final Forms can do for you, go to finalforms.com/Jake. Once again, go to finalforms.com/Jake to get started and find out everything that Final Forms can do for you. We also want to say thanks to Violet Defense. Violet Defense is dedicated to protecting our world from germs by bringing the power of UV disinfection to everyday spaces. Their patented technology enables them to harness the power of the sun to incorporate ultraviolet light into products and environments like never before. Whether you're ready to implement existing products, or if you'd like to explore researching and developing a custom deployment of their technology for your school, Violet Defense has the solutions and the experience you need. Go to violetdefense.com for more information about their great products. We also want to say thank you to Sideline Interactive. You know, it's becoming harder and harder to fund an athletic department, but Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every year, while also creating excitement in the gym and the ultimate game day experience for your athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com and see exactly what their fantastic products can do for you. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. We also want to say thank you to Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. You know, they are on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They've got a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles and an extensive library of templates to make it easier than ever to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. For ideas on how to showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Or to learn more and get started with your digital Wall of Fame tribute, call them at 614-981-3589. Or you can email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. And we want to thank Huddle for their support. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Over 200,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, use Huddle to help their teams play better using video and analytics. Huddle is the complete performance platform. They have online tools, mobile and desktop apps, smart cameras like the Huddle Focus. There's always been analytics, but there's a whole lot more. Huddle is also built for every level of play, from club and youth teams all the way through high school and colleges, and even the pros use Huddle to help their teams play at the highest levels. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes, a lot of their parents, and the coaches of the college teams you're trying to get to recruit your kids. If you want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you and your program and how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their professionals. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. We also want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can find out more about what Hometown Ticketing can do for you and your program by going to hometownticketing.com and talk to their experts. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. And we want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack also gives you access to the 95% of the parents and the student athletes who really love your program. And it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to athleticsurveys.com and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466, or you can email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes, you're really missing out. Talk to the pros at Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack and let them show you how to take your athletic program from good to great. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We got a really cool guest today, Bill Eckstrom. Bill is the founder of Ecsell Performance Coaching, Ecsell Sports. Got an incredible background. He's, as I said, he's founder of a couple of different companies. He's done TED Talks, wrote a very successful book, The Coaching Effect. He's a nationally known speaker, and we're very excited to have him today. Bill Eckstrom, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Thank you, Jake. It's fun to be with you today.
Okay, well, we're excited to hear what you have to share. Excuse me. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that 5-minute bio, where you were born, where you grew up in college, and maybe kind of how your path has led you to, this point in your career.
Okay. Well, do this in 5 minutes. I could, probably.
You can take 6 if you want
to. Simplistically, I'm from a small town in Nebraska, born and raised, went to school at the University of Nebraska. And the reason that's significant is the people, the aura, the culture that I was raised in was Husker football. And while it's not so as meaningful today, perhaps to some, Jake, you and I are old enough to know, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, how dominant they were. And that's really what kind of got me watching coaches. Because I remember I couldn't figure out what was it that was unique. Why was Nebraska, of all places in the Midwest, why were they bringing such high caliber teams around? Which really got me focused on Coach Osborne. And I remember I would go to games or watch games, and I would spend as much time that I could watching his behaviors as I would player behaviors. Because that would, even back before I knew how to define it, I always knew that teams performed and grew and evolved and developed. They were a reflection of how they were coached. So I wanted to know how Osborne was coaching to do that in such an effective way. Well, then that eventually, through the years, bled over into business. So when I was out of school, then I sold, I became an executive, eventually through the years, then became an executive of a publicly traded company. I actually was fired from that job, which I talk about in my first TED Talk. But all those series of events kind of brought me to where I'm at today in the athletic world. For over a decade, Jake, our business has been studying and literally quantifying the impact leaders have on the performance of business teams, always with a desire in the back of my mind, man, wasn't this fun to really take into the world of sport, to understand if we can do it in business, we can certainly do it in athletics. To understand the effect coaches are having on the growth of, or the experience of student athletes. And eventually we kind of, without even making a deliberate choice, we were drawn into the athletic world. I think began after my first TED Talk, because in that talk, I put out a model that talks about how growth only occurs in a state of discomfort, and how as leaders and coaches, we have an obligation to do that in a healthy way, for whether it's in the working world or student athletes. And a lot of athletic teams started to use this model to explain to their athletes, hey, here's why we work hard. Here's why we stretch you. Here's why we make you uncomfortable. And that then evolved into a series of meetings and focus groups with ADs and coaches, where we learned that ADs, their number one objective was to provide a positive student athlete experience. And unequivocally, they said that was it. That was their number one objective. And what we learned, Jake, is that while that was their primary objective, none of them could quantify whether or not that was happening. So that was our foray into the world of sports, and we helped them do that. So long answer to a short question.
No, that was actually pretty good. And again, you and I were talking before the podcast. I think speaking, for athletic directors, that cynical athletic director, longtime coach. As I was going through, your background, your website, that was the thing that jumped out at me. It was not some theory and guesswork, but it was research and facts. And I think that's what coaches and ADs are looking for. Football coach, they have their statistics and they know, okay, this play, we average, 6 yards a play, a carry when we hand the ball to this guy, or basketball, shooting charts and things like that. So that's what really jumped out at me about Ecsell and some of the things that you were doing. For our listeners, we're visiting with Bill Eckstrom. He's the founder of Ecsell Sports. We're going to hear some more, but let's take a quick break. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank Final Forms for their support of the Educational AD Podcast. Final Forms is the industry leader in forms and registration, but you have to know this. Final Forms is more than just forms. Final Forms is a team, it's technology, and it's a service that provides schools with compliance, communication, and risk management solutions. Final Forms can help your stakeholders with things like mobile accessibility and has reminders for parents about policies, about physicals, and all the forms that go with athletics. Final Forms can help with team communication, with attendance, and even certification management for coaches. And for ADs, Final Forms can help with eligibility, with rosters, and all the reports that come across your desk. Plus, it does this with secure language translation, and it's ADA compliant. It's time for you to talk to a team that's walked in your shoes. To take the next steps and find out what Final Forms could do for you, go to finalforms.com/Jake. One more time, go to finalforms.com/Jake and get started on your journey with Final Forms. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. We're visiting today with Bill Eckstrom, the founder of Ecsell Sports. Bill, we always ask our guests to share some of the mentors that they've had in our profession. Leadership, mentorship is so important, and none of us get here on our own. So who are some of the people that have helped you along the way to get to, where you're at now?
I think like a lot of people, or perhaps not like, I've been very fortunate, Jake. And I think maybe some of them I've allowed in my life. Others have just kind of forced their way in. Thank goodness. I think one of my earlier memories, and I'm thinking more along the lines of teacher, coach, boss, not family members or family friends. In seventh grade, I had a teacher that made me realize that in spite of my behaviorally disordered self, he found value in me and made me believe that I wasn't dumb, that I was bright and capable. And it's funny because as simplistic as it sounds, I started to behave like I wasn't dumb, like I was smart, and went from getting C's to A's. So his name is Mr. Yankee, and he was very instrumental kind of in that middle school era. Fortunate enough in high school to have a couple of athletic coaches who kept me academically eligible. And not sure, I've reached out to, it's funny you bring this up because I think about this a lot, and I've reached out to all of these people that are still around or still alive and let them know. The most recent being, I actually wrote about in our book called The Coaching Effect. His real name is Bill, but since my name is Bill and I was the co-author of the book, I couldn't use Bill, so I had to give him a new name. In the book, he's called Mitch, but he lives actually not far from you, Jake. And Mitch was he was one of those guys that played collegiate football. But he's very bright. He understood a coach's impact, and man, I tell you what, he was my greatest advocate and my greatest challenger in my adult life. And when working for him, it was the greatest professional growth I think I ever had. And I can also align that with the most challenging time I had professionally as well. But I think what I'm describing was what too many people avoid. I've got it. I knew he loved me. I knew he cared for me, but because he did, boy, did he challenge me. So anyway, there you go. There's a few of them.
No, I can certainly relate. And I think you really hit it on the head. Those people that we admire that, really stick out in our lives, they were encouragers, but because, we did have that respect for them, they also, were constantly challenging us, say, hey, you can do better. And we wanted to do better because we cared about them. Very cool stuff. Thanks for sharing. Again, for our listeners, we're visiting today with Bill Eckstrom, the founder of Ecsell Sports. We're going to hear a little bit more about that when we come back. Please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We also want to thank Huddle for their support of the Educational AD Podcast. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Over 200,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, use Huddle to help their teams play better using video and analytics. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools, mobile and desktop apps, smart cameras like the Huddle Focus. There's always been analytics, but there's a whole lot more. Huddle's built for every level of play, from club and youth teams all the way through high school and college programs. And even the pros use Huddle to help their teams play at the highest level. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes, a lot of their parents, and the coaches of the teams you're trying to get to recruit your kids. If you want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you and your program and how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their professionals. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Welcome back, everyone. We're visiting with Bill Eckstrom, the founder of Ecsell and Ecsell Sports. Bill, you talked a little bit about this in your intro, but share with our listeners, what is Ecsell? Maybe some broad brushstrokes, and then we'll take a deeper dive. But again, help that athletic director or coach that's listening in Florida or Nebraska. What is Ecsell?
Well, Ecsell Sports, we are focused on a pretty simple mission, which is helping ADs and coaches create a more positive student athlete experience. And so what we do is we quantify a coach's impact on that experience. Likewise, we can also quantify an athletic director's impact on their coaches. So we use research, we use data. What's interesting is I think, Jake, so many of the things that create a positive experience, and I have an upcoming TED Talk that focuses on this exact topic, were considered soft skills. Things like relationships, now psychological safety, things that used to be perceived as soft skills are now measurable. We can actually quantify the strength of the connections they have with their student athletes. We can quantify the psychological safety environment of an athletic team. And what we end up becoming is kind of funny, as you just had Huddle on here. We become a coach's game film. A coach has impact on the growth and performance of their athletes. Well, what we do is help the coaches understand what that is and then how to improve it. So it's not just, here's what you do well, here's your impact, but then we've created an online portal that allows coaches to come in and, how do I improve my connections? What do I do to create a greater psychologically safe environment? How come my disciplines aren't as strong as they should be? What structure should I have in place that I don't? On and on and on. So there's a litany of things. So we really bring that data-based look at a coach's impact. And from an AD's perspective, what it does is that allows an AD to say, hey, I now know how to help my volleyball coach, my lacrosse coach, my football coach, because then they have the data to know what they do well and what they don't do well.
As I was hearing you explain that, and again, I've been able to see your TED Talk, I've been on your website. I think the picture, became just a little bit clearer. Athletic directors are always, they're always dealing with the minutiae of the job, scheduling, the transportation, the budgets, and things like that. And they do a great job. But the things, this is me talking, but the things they really want to do is get out and work with their coaches and help them grow, professional development opportunities and enrichment things. And it sounds like that's exactly what Ecsell would allow them to do. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely it is. We've had, so many of our ADs say, holy cow, Bill, with your data now, I'm able to have meaningful conversations that are fact-based, not just, because ADs can't get around to watch coaches coach all the time. They can't, because of they're so busy, legitimately so. So they have, with our work, they have the ability to be able to have a data-driven approach. And what we're really going to promote coming up with especially with the introduction of the TED Talk next month, is the difference between transformational versus transactional coaching, and helping coaches understand whether they're transactional or transformational, where on that journey. But also, if you're an AD, don't you want to have more transformational coaches in your stable of coaches? Well, of course you do. So, but what is it? What's an AD's role in that? How can they help them? Are they a transformational or a transactional athletic director? So those are the things we can help them with.
We're going to do this at the end of the podcast, but Bill, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out, pick your brain a little bit more, or, again, go to the website and find out more about Ecsell Sports, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Well, Thank you for that opportunity, by the way, Jake. Ecsell Sports is ECSELL sports.com. I'm Bill Eckstrom. I'm on Twitter. I'm on, at least for now, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, BillEckstrom.com, I have a website. Our parent company, Ecsell Institute, spelled the same way. So I can be found anywhere, and I respond. Anybody who connects with me, I reciprocate. I'm a big believer in collaboration and the power of the collective.
Bill Eckstrom, Ecsell Sports. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to take a little deeper dive into some of the things that Ecsell Sports can do for coaches and ADs. Please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive for their support of the podcast. You know, it's becoming harder and harder to fund an athletic department, but Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every year while creating excitement in the gym and the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com for more information. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com and see exactly what their fantastic products can do for you. We're back visiting with Bill Eckstrom, the founder of Ecsell Sports. Bill, as a longtime athletic director and coach, as I was listening to you, explain, some of the basics of, Ecsell Sports and how it can help ADs and coaches, I was really intrigued, and it really makes some sense. But let's go and take that next step. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive. Suppose, I am intrigued as an AD and I call you up and say, Bill, we'd like you to come to our school. How is that going to unfold? What are some of the things that we can expect? And let's also talk about the end game. What are some of the results that we can hope for?
Again, Jake, thank you for that opportunity to discuss this. When any of our work, when it begins with a school, it's really, if the school does not have a desire to create a more positive student athlete experience through their coaches, they shouldn't even bother with us. But for schools that really want to know, for schools that really want to quantify, to be able to look and say, we are doing everything we can. What we would do is it's just like the medical industry, to understand what the existing environment is. And the only way to do that is to measure. And the only way to measure is through the eyes of the student athlete. So in other words, we use surveys primarily for our measurement tools, because the only way to know a coach's impact on student athletes is to survey the student athletes. Now, what's interesting about that is the survey, we're not looking for this big group hug, kumbaya, boy, we need to be soft on student athletes. Oh my goodness, no. As you probably learned, Jake, in my last TED Talk, our data would show that coaches who create great disciplines, who push and challenge student athletes, using this as an example, in a healthy way, create a more positive student athlete experience. So the concept, for example, that we need to be soft on student athletes, nope, wrong. We don't look for that in our research and our data. We're looking for people that one of the themes that we measure is challenge. So getting back, and I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole, the first thing we do is measure. And the things we're looking for are, we're measuring 6 themes: a coach's ability to connect, to create a psychologically safe environment, to create structures, their ability to communicate effectively, to develop the skills of student athletes, and I am missing one. Structure. Anyway, I might spend too much time to figure out the sixth one, but there are 6 of these behavioral themes that we report on. So ADs and coaches both get these back, individual reports of understanding my impact. So we measure the first thing. Number 2, we report, we give them, help them understand their coaching strengths, their opportunities for growth. Then we give them tools to get better. It would be like a coach telling a student athlete, hey, here's the things you need to improve on, and then just walking away and not telling them what to do or how to improve. We're not believers in that. We want to provide that opportunity. So we've created what we call the Ecsell Learning Portal, where coaches and athletic directors can go and access how to create greater psychologically safe environments, how to listen to podcasts. Where can I listen to podcasts like this? So it's a community-based site, as well as an formal education-based site. So those are the areas. So to summarize that, we measure, we report, we educate and train are the way we work with schools.
Again, as I'm listening to this, I'm just, thinking about how this might've played out with our coaches. And again, I was very fortunate. I had a tremendous coaching staff. We didn't have the data that you're talking about, but from the eye test, I think our coaches, did a wonderful job, but it still would have been very cool to know that. Can you pick out, say, one of your clients that you've worked with, and maybe just share? You don't have to name the school or anything, but give an example, a little snapshot of a success story. How the Ecsell Sports program really made an impact.
It's funny because I'm going to highlight one in my upcoming TED Talk, which is. So I'll share a little bit about her, and then a gentleman who's a basketball coach. A couple quick little side stories. A gentleman who was a wonderful boys basketball coach, high school varsity basketball coach. That during when he first started working when their school first started working with us, when we got his reports back, he noticed that some of his theme scores weren't where he thought they would be or should be or could be. And during that season, it's funny, we just did an interview on this not long ago, and he was chuckling. In a tight game, fourth quarter, he said everything started to unravel, which he said, now looking back retrospectively, I see we weren't a safe environment. Our players couldn't play well under pressure. They did not know how to handle stress. And a referee called a foul on one of his senior starters. And coach is watching this occur, and all of a sudden the referee throws the kid out of the game. And of course, coach calls ref over, say, what happened? Why'd you throw him out? And he said, well, because when I walked by him after calling him out on a foul, he turned and whispered in my ear and told me to F off. And he used the full word. So what was unique about that, though, what makes this coach different is he said, instead of going back and immediately, he said, this was my lowest point in my coaching career. Instead of going back and thinking about how am I going to discipline this kid, how dare he? He said, I went home and I looked in the mirror and said, what am I doing at practice that allows this young man to think these behaviors are beneficial for himself and the team? What am I doing? What are my assistant coaches doing that makes this okay? He said, that's when everything changed. He said, before someone would be late 3, 4, 5 minutes late for my practice, no big deal. Now he goes, now it's a big deal. Now we run everything. He goes, the way I treat my coaches, we used to have our arguments he goes, not anymore. He said, we emulate every single thing we want to see with our players. He said, instead of berating a player for taking bad shots, he said, now in practice, we support independent thought. He said, we want them to play all out. And he said, but if a player still takes 10 bad shots on the court, I look and say, what am I doing in practice? That's not the player, that's me. He said, so they take ownership of the players. And the latter is a varsity volleyball coach who, when she got her theme scores back, I'll never forget it. She was so taken aback by learning that only half of her student athletes felt psychologically safe or believed they had a connection with her. This is a coach that truly cared deeply about her student athletes. She loves her girls, she would say, and she does. But what was interesting is they didn't know it, because she's like a coach. Man, when practice starts, Jake, you know this, they get after it. They got drills and conditioning and game strategy and skill development, right? And then we've got film to watch and opponents to study. She was not intentional about relationships. She was not intentional about creating a psychologically safe environment. And then she got her results and everything changed. Everything changed. She started to, first and foremost, she introduces 4 team values to the team, none of which has anything to do with winning, that all of her players could recite. Holding overnight retreats, focusing solely at those retreats on development of relationships and strengthening of their minds. She took players to coffee. She had them set individual goals and then held one-on-one meetings to review goals. She does all of these things in a very intentional way. And then she did what so few believe, or let me put it this way. So many believe is counterintuitive to winning, Jake. Compared to a year ago, her team spent fewer hours in the gym working on skills and drills, and more hours away from the gym working on relationships, mindset, and team dynamics. And the results, and while the results, what was most important to her is her theme scores a year later, the next season, all improved. But those 2 most important ones, psych safety and connection, improved the most. They jumped by over 30%. And what coaches always want to hear, okay, did that convert to performance? Some ADs will say they don't care. I think we all care. But what's most important, did it impact the student athlete experience in a positive way? And that's what we quantify, the coach's effect on that. So the answer was yes, across the board. But what was really cool is the team was district champs for the first time in 19 years, state tournament semifinalists for the first time in 35 years. And what's really interesting, when she shifted her focus away from winning and made her focus all about the student athletes and giving them a positive experience, they broke the school record for wins. So I think that's interesting. So there's 2 stories.
No, and those are great examples. And 2 things you mentioned that really caught my ear. There at the end, you talked about not focusing on winning. We always tried to with our coaches, and again, our coaches did a wonderful job of embracing this. Winning was not a goal, but it was an outcome of doing all the right things along the way. And you mentioned, I can't remember your exact phrasing, but it made me think of a theme that I heard years and years ago. It had to be, over 25 years ago. I don't know who said it. I don't know where I saw it, but I embraced it and then shared it with my coaches for the next 20 plus years. And it was everything you see at a school, everything, behavior, locker rooms, campus, everything you see, it's either coached or it's allowed. Which one is it? Oh, it was when you were talking about the coach and the young man who, dropped the F-bomb. it's either coached or it's allowed. Which one is it? And I think that was a great example of, coaching. He wasn't coaching that behavior, but he was allowing that behavior.
Right. Which then we would tell, which means you're coaching it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
By allowing it, it still falls in your purview, right? It's still a result of you
and
your other coaches.
Yeah. Great stuff. We're going to take another break. Again, for our listeners, we're visiting today with Bill Eckstrom, the founder of Ecsell and Ecsell Sports. Please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. They are on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They've got a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles and an extensive library of templates to make it easier than ever to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. For ideas on how to showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Or to learn more and get started with your digital Wall of Fame tribute, call them at 614-981-3589, or you can email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. Welcome back, everyone. We're visiting today with Bill Eckstrom, the founder of Ecsell Sports. Bill, one of the questions we've asked our guests recently has to do with this idea of coaching toughness. 100 years ago, when I was in high school, it was very common for my coaches to say things like, come on, guys, you got to be tough, or come on, Jake, you got to suck it up. And we knew what they meant, and we did it. I think in the years since, we have found much better ways to communicate those thoughts and coach our kids. But in my opinion, toughness, some people call it resilience. Toughness is an important part of, the athletic experience and even life. So here's my question. How can we help kids to develop toughness and at the same time be sensitive to and aware of the very real social emotional challenges that Generation Z kids experiencing that I never had to experience? Do you have any advice for us?
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this a little bit, Jake, and feel free to jump in anytime. I think coaches and ADs have to understand what they mean by toughness. And I think qualifying the word, the definition is important. There's physical toughness, there's mental toughness, there's how those two tie together. I'm not sure if, I have no science or research that would say athletes are physically less tough or more tough than they used to be. Certainly, I think mental resiliency seems to have gone backwards. Mental toughness, some would refer to it as. But one of the things we know, first of all, is mental toughness can be built. That can improve, that can be coached, that can be taught and learned. The challenge is most coaches don't know how to do it. They don't know how to recognize it. They don't know that it's needed or not needed. It's kind of like, the story I shared before your break on the volleyball coach. If you had asked her before we got the data back, did she have great relationships and connections with her athletes? She would have said, oh yeah, love them all. They love me too, right? And then she learns that 50%, only half of them feel like not that they don't like her, but feel connected to her. Right. Likewise, how many of your athletes are mentally tough? And here's what I would challenge a coach with. Unless you have great connections, you're not going to improve that. Coaches cannot expect, because they have formal authority, they're going to be just very transactional if they believe because they have formal authority. I will tell you, listen and go do. That doesn't work that way anymore. It does with some, but do you know which players it does work with? Which players it doesn't work with? If you as a coach do not crawl into the lives of your student athletes, and I mean that literally, to the degree you can, to the degree the law allows in a healthy way, if you crawl into their lives, you will know your Simone Biles versus Michael Jordan. Now, again, we put two extremes out there, right? But in terms of mental toughness, Simone Biles is not wrong or right. Simone Biles is what she had is. It's a real situation. People say, well, she's not mentally. Well, that was her. That was in the moment. You can't tell her that. You can't. If I say, I feel this way, we said, no, you don't feel that way. No, what do you mean I don't? I do. So coaches can't coach to it. They can't help if they don't know their student athletes intimately. And I mean that word in a professional way, professionally intimate with their student athletes. When you do that, you can become memorable. You can become that difference maker. You can become that coach. You asked me earlier, who were the people in my life, right? You can become that coach that 20 years from now, your student athletes would say, hey man, I might not be where I am today without coaching my life. Those are the things that are important. And you'll never be that without having those connections and those relationships and creating those healthy environments.
Wow. Very powerful stuff. I think you're absolutely right. The communicating to the kids, this is what I want you to do, rather than just, like my coaches did. And I had great coaches. I loved them. Just, come on, you got to be tough. You're absolutely right. You need to, tell them, your student athletes, this is the expectation, this is how we're going to do it. And I love your phrase, crawling into their lives. That's just so, visual, very cool stuff. Bill, this has been great spending a little bit of time with you. I wish we had more time, but we're not quite done. We always like to wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox. And you certainly shared a lot about how ADs can do their jobs better. But in just a minute, I'm going to task you with sending out a brand new athletic director on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. We're going to take a quick break and hear from Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack that sponsored the AD Toolbox segment. And then we're going to find out what Bill Eckstrom is going to put into his athletic director toolbox. We'll be right back. We want to thank Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack for sponsoring the Athletic Director's Toolbox segment. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack also connects you with the 95% of the parents and the student athletes who really love your program, and it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to athleticsurveys.com and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466, or you can email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out. Talk to the folks at Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack and let them show you how to take your athletic program from good to great. All right, it's that time of the podcast. We've been visiting with Bill Eckstrom from Ecsell Sports, the founder. Bill, you certainly know your way around the world of athletics, but right now I want you to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going to go in Bill Eckstrom's athletic director toolbox?
I'm going to keep these short, or let me rephrase that. Understanding what should go in the toolbox should be few, because behavior change is hard. And we're giving ADs 8 things to do differently. That ain't going to happen. So number 1, a new AD comes into the role. How to what questions to ask to get to know your coaches. That may sound silly, but if you need to set up a series of one-on-one meetings with all your coaches to crawl into their lives. Okay. So that's number one. Number two is funny. You were just talking about student athlete surveys. That's a huge component of it. If I'm an AD, if my objective is to create a positive student athlete experience, which I've never heard an AD say, nah, that's not it. You better quantify that. So in your toolbox, you better understand how your coaches are doing that. And, obviously that may sound self-promotional, but and while it is, I'm passionate about that. If I'm an AD, how do I help my coaches grow if I don't know what they're doing, how they're impacting today? And then the last is give them tools to get better. And again, that's self-serving, but also it's, hey, we have to understand. Well, it's easy to say, well, yeah, everybody should have connections with their athletes, but how do you do that effectively? Because coaches think they do and they aren't. How do we create a psychologically safe environment? How to create better structures? How do I communicate better? You're talking about cell phone, these things are quantifiable, a coach's ability to communicate. So I would say those two things is a document that walks me through best questions for one-on-one meetings. In my toolbox, I got to have data on my coach's impact on that athlete experience. And number three, tools to get better.
Boy, great stuff. You really, you make me feel good. Years ago when I accepted the position as the AD at the McClay School in Tallahassee, my final position, one of the first things I did, well, I guess it was the first thing I did. I'd sent out an email to all of our coaches, our head coaches, assistant coaches. We had 80 plus coaches at our school. They knew I was the new AD, but I just kind of introduced myself. It was, late June. And I just said, hey, I'm excited to get to work here. I want to meet you, let's set up a time where you can come in. And, almost every single one did make it in over the summer. And I asked them all the same question. I said, hey, thanks for coming in. I want to ask you, what can I do to make your job more fun? I obviously I got the idea from somebody else. I didn't think of that on my own, but they all, later on I heard that they were just so, impressed and they're surprised. Nobody's ever asked us, our opinion. Right. I was a full-time AD. I wasn't teaching. I wasn't coaching. And many of them, were, teaching full loads and coaching, or they worked in the community. And so I had time to take things off their desk, whether it was the organization, data input, fundraising, things like that. I wanted them to coach. I wanted them to have the fun part of it. And so, your number one thing, one-on-one meetings, I guess I did one thing right in my coaching or my AD
I'm sure
career.
You did a lot right, Jake. And what's interesting about that point is one of the things we've learned, one of the questions we ask that has a very strong correlation to a student's perception of having a good athlete experience is a very simple question, which is, does your coach make playing this sport fun?
Right.
How they answer that question has a direct correlation to whether or not they feel they're having a positive experience.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt, it's got to be fun. Well, I could spend all day, talking about this stuff, but thanks so much for being on the podcast. One more time, if one of our ADs or coaches, somebody listening wants to reach out, find out more about how Ecsell Sports can help them in their program. And listeners, I really think you should. What's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Sure. Again, EcsellSports.com. Contact us. On there, it's ECSELL sports.com. Reach out to me directly. I'm on, like I said, LinkedIn, Twitter, Bill Eckstrom. And you can email me directly, B Eckstrom, B as in Bill Eckstrom, at EcsellSports.com, or excuse me, that's wrong. B. Eckstrom at EcsellInstitute.com, the parent company. So ECLLinstitute.com. Best place to get me. I always respond.
Okay. Bill Eckstrom, Ecsell Sports, thanks so much for being on the podcast today, and all the best moving forward. I'm looking forward to seeing that next TED Talk.
Thank you, Jake.
For our listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews get uploaded to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you listening today. Come back again just about every day for new content on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time. And before we go, we want to thank Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can find out more about what Hometown Ticketing can do for you and your program by going to hometownticketing.com and talk to their experts. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. Thanks again for listening to the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.